This is Rabbi Sachs coming to you from the Chai Center, and welcome to the Chai Academy, which is a plethora of Torah classes recorded live from the headquarters of the Chai Center, my office, and and then placed on the Chai Academy, thechai.com/Chai Academy. We also have a YouTube channel now, which is if you search Chai Academy on YouTube, you will find it. Subscribe, and please God, there will be plenty of other things up there as well, in addition to other rabbis' classes. So, we have been discussing, this is the second class, self-encapsulated class, hi Eileen, of Chanukah. The story, the deeper story, the lessons, the significance of Chanukah, just like anything else in Judaism, because the belief is that nothing is happenstance, nothing is random. And so therefore, if it happens, it's because there's a message. Take, and the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the movement, right, the Hasidic Brotherhood, the Hasidic movement, he says, whenever two people meet, it's because there's a deeper reason for it. Whatever you see as you're driving, it's because it's not random and happenstance, but rather you were supposed to see it and try and learn a lesson from it. So for sure, a Jewish holiday, and is compiled upon piled of lessons, and so let's get to it. We were discussing the story of Chanukah. So just to give you an idea, the reason why the Syrian Greeks attacked the Jews was actually a story a long time in the making. So we start off with Antiochus III, the king. He was the king in 176 BCE, something like that. And he was a decent person. He wasn't bad to the Jews. He let them have their reign. He let them have do as they wish, and he wasn't bad. However, his territory was conquered by the Romans. Right? We know Rome conquered all. Rome was on the way to conquering the world practically, and so when Rome conquered the region, so Antiochus, the king, Antiochus III, basically became under the power of Rome. He had autonomous power, but he had to pay homage and he had to pay taxes. So therefore, what he did was he started to tax the Commonwealth. He started to tax anybody under his jurisdiction, which includes the Jews, right? So because he had to pay taxes, so therefore the Jews had to pay taxes to him. But he wasn't a bad person. And then what happened is that he died, and he was taken over by another king who was called Seleucus or Seleucus, something like that. And he was a little bit more ruthless. So Seleucus changed his name to Antiochus IV. Now, he was given a nickname, by the way. This Antiochus IV, he was given a nickname, which is Epimanes, and Epimanes actually is a nickname that was said behind his back, which means madman. He had other nicknames also, as God and things like that. God lives, eternal God. But he was also called by those who really knew his character. They called him Epimanes. So he was a madman, and he really taxed the Jews. He really sought to get a lot of money out of them, and it didn't help. And the following, I think, is one of the most important lessons of Chanukah. So there were Jews that were loyal to Judaism, and there were Jews that were disloyal to Judaism. There were Jews that the ones that were loyal, right? You know, the Hasmonean family, and but then there were Jews who were basically Hellenists, and the Hellenist Jews had basically forsaken, for the most part, their religion, and they were all into adopting the Greek culture, as we discussed yesterday. So the Hellenist Jews were basically, it was all about culture. It was all about, how can we be more cultured Greeks? How can we be more cultured people of society? And they viewed God, the one God, I should say, as antiquated. They viewed Torah as just antiquated law. It doesn't apply. And you hear it today, by the way. People say that pork it was only the reason why pork was non-kosher was because of trichinosis. But now that we have refrigeration and proper sanitizing and conditions and sanitary, we can eat pork. That's a Hellenist. Someone tells you that's a Hellenist, because the Torah was written for all times. So once again, this story, we see it repeated time and time again. By the destruction of the Second Temple, there was a war between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Pharisees were the Jews that were loyal to the Torah, the Sadducees that were not. Here you had the Hellenists and the non-Hellenists. So the Hellenists loved Broadway in Greeksville. They loved the idea of that you could love anybody, and which you can't love anybody, but it was, they just loved that. They felt the Torah was restrictive and the Greek culture was freeing. You could worship any god, you can make love to any boy, or any girl. Pedophilia was accepted. In fact, I think I read it in Plato's Republic, I may be wrong, that the highest form of love is a man to boy. It was so the Hellenists adopted that, and so and obviously the non-Hellenists, they didn't adopt that. So there was bad feelings all around. The problems started is when the Hellenists told Antiochus IV that the Jews have money in the temple. There's different lishkas, there's different campaigns that the temple had. They had the orphans fund to help orphans, right? They had the half shekel fund. There was a fund that if to support the communal sacrifices, the communal costs, everybody gave a half a shekel. Everybody gave, a half a dollar, times thousands and thousands and thousands, right? It's worth a lot of money. So he was told that there's a lot of money. So they came to the temple and they begged the high priest. The high priest is, Yochanan at that time was a righteous man, high priest. He begged them not to take the money. And there's different stories. They did take, they didn't take. At first they didn't take, then they did take. Anyway, so eventually, Yochanan was, because they weren't forthgiving with temple money, Yochanan was replaced. Yochanan was the father, by the way, of Matisyahu, who was the father of the 5 Maccabee sons, right? But Yochanan, who was a righteous man, was replaced. He was replaced by his brother. His brother was Yehoshua, Joshua, but he didn't go. He didn't go by the name Joshua. He went by the name Jason. Right? He went by the name Jason, and he was a complete Hellenist. So he had the high priest, the Kohen Gadol of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, was a Hellenist who believed in polytheism and many gods. He believed in you know, just you know, nonsense, and any new stuff that came up, he embraced. Anything but God, anything but Torah, basically. His name was and his name was Jason. Um, and eventually Jason was replaced, and he was replaced by a fellow called Menelaus. So Menelaus became the high priest. Um, and um, and this, somebody say high priest, somebody say he wasn't a high priest, he was the governor, whatever. But the bottom line is that there were Hellenists running the temple. Right? Menelaus was a I don't know if he was a high priest, actually. I think he was more of a like a governor or a leader. And Menelaus was an animal, an animal. He decided that he wanted the Jews to accept Greek culture. He had Jason, right, and he had others. Now he wanted to get. So he called upon this great sage, Rabbi Eliezer, and he said to Rabbi Eliezer, in front of everybody, "I want you to eat pork." And Rabbi Eliezer says, "I'm not eating pork." He goes, "Why? Come on, it's anyway." So they made Rabbi Eliezer a spectacle. Everybody came to see. The Hellenists came, the non-Hellenists came, and Rabbi Eliezer refused to eat pork, and they killed him. They killed him. They killed the great Rabbi Eliezer because he would not. He refused to eat pork. There was then the Jews. There was a rumor that Antiochus, the king, had been killed, and therefore they drove Menelaus out of town. Because they heard that Antiochus went off to another war, and Menelaus, his governor, was killed, so they drove him out. And then when Antiochus came back, that's when it started. It started that they put on such laws against the Jewish people. You can't do circumcision. Anything spiritually related, if you're doing it for spiritual reasons, you cannot do. You can't study Torah, but you can study Jewish culture. You cannot have a bris because of God told you to do, because of some spiritual reason. You want to have a circumcision, that you may do. It makes sense. You know, it reduces this and reduces that, and so many different restrictions. They couldn't keep Shabbat. They couldn't study Torah. They couldn't have yeshivas, and eventually the Jews became less and less and less involved with their Judaism. And there was the people who kept true to Judaism lived in the Judean hills. You know, it always irks me when they say that the West Bank is occupied by the Jews. Well, Judean hills is where the Maccabee brothers came from. Modi'in, which is in parts of the Judean hills, is where the Maccabees lived. And to call that occupied territories is ridiculous. It's, you know, call it Judea Samaria, call it West Bank, if you will. Even then, that's a bothersome name to me. But to call it occupied territories, oh my goodness, you know, it's like a joke. It's like a thief coming into a bank and saying, the money you have in your vault is mine, and you're occupying my money. I mean, you know, a crack addict tells you that, you're gonna laugh. So why should we take this seriously, that it's occupied? Anyway, so they lived in the Judean hills, and they came, and they lived in a city, a town, which is now being built up now, huge now. It's huge. It used to be nothing. Modi'in. So Modi'in, they're actually selling property now in Modi'in like it's like wildfire. Apartment buildings. There was a huge fire about 10, 15 years ago, and now they're rebuilding apartment buildings, but as condos in Modi'in. So they came, the government and the Hellenists came to Modi'in, and they knocked on the door of Matisyahu, who was the son of Yochanan, the high priest. He was the nephew of Jason, the high priest. And they said to him, "We need you to worship an idol." And he said, no. He said, well, we're asking you to worship an idol. And he said, no. So a Hellenist Jew said, well, I'll do it. I'm a Jew and I'll worship the idol. And all the Hellenists applauded. And Matisyahu took out a knife and killed him. Killed the Jew. Terrible. Civil war. But he did it in order to sanctify God's name. Right? So it was Jew fighting Jew. And so he killed a Hellenist. And then they ran into the hills. So Modin in the hills, but then they ran into the forests of the hills. And there, the Jews, it was a small band of brothers. It really was. It was Matisyahu. And he had 5 sons. And he told Shimon, you're going to be the Chacham, the wise person, the moral authority. Judah, you're going to be the Gibbar, the warrior. You're going to be the strategic person who sets out the troops. And basically, what they did was pretty much guerrilla warfare. At first, they attacked these troops. And so there was a battalion of 60 soldiers. So they killed half of them and ran back in the night. And they couldn't beat them. So the government decided, the Syrian Greek government decided they're going to send in 40,000 soldiers to clear up these how many were there? Right? There were 300, 500, 1,000, 2,000. There wasn't more than that. Sent in 40,000, and they were beat. They were beat back. So these 1,000 to 2,000 Jews beat back an army of 40,000 soldiers. That was the greatest miracle, even greater than the oil miracle that we'll talk of, because first of all, that doesn't happen, right? You understand, guerrilla warfare you get, but when you're actually going sword to sword, and you fight back 40,000 of the enemy, and you're vastly outnumbered. What would inspire someone to do that? It's like a suicide run, right? It's a kamikaze type of thing. You know you're not coming back, but they did come back. Sure, they had losses, but they came back and they beat this army. Once they beat that army, I think Antiochus IV realized it's hopeless. It's hopeless. So they regathered. So they beat back the army. They came, and the altar was broken, and they had to rebuild the altar. They had to clean up the place. The menorah was stolen. They had to make a menorah. They made it out of wood. They had no choice, right? And they made a menorah, and they couldn't find any oil. And as the story goes, they found oil, but they found oil that was contaminated. In other words, to be in the holy temple, everything had to be pure, and it had to have like a kosher symbol. This was sealed by the high priest, and not Jason. They could care less about Jason's seal. It wasn't worth anything. He was a Hellenist after all. So they were searching around, and they didn't want to light the menorah with impure oil. We'll talk about that also probably tomorrow, as why not? So we'll talk about that tomorrow. So they eventually they searched all around, and they found one jug of oil. They filled the menorah. It had enough to last for 1 day, and it lasted 8 days, right? And so this cup of olive oil that was supposed to last 24 hours lasted 8 times 24 hours. Right? So it was just a miracle, because each day it only took an eighth. It took an eighth. Right? It took an eighth. So it wasn't that the first day it burnt out and it continued burning. Then that first day wouldn't have been a miracle. But each day it only burnt an eighth until they procure new pure olive oil, the virgin press, sealed by the high priest. So and they lit, and that's why we light the menorah today. But we'll discuss that in greater detail, because there's a lot to be gleaned from the fact of this olive oil, why they could use the regular oil, etc. Now, everybody breathed a sigh of relief, but not the Maccabee brothers. And this is part of the story of Chanukah that is never told. That is never told. So you had now restoration. The enemy was pushed to the side. The Hellenists, right, were because Judah Maccabee was such a hero with the other brothers, and people started to different farmers came and they couldn't work, they were under siege. But so instead of working, they joined Judah Maccabee. So now we had a small army, and he wanted to go back to Modi'in. He and his brothers wanted to go back to Modi'in. A couple of brothers were killed in battle, they wanted to just go back to life. But Judah said, "My dear brethren, we can't. It's only a matter of time before the enemy regroups. It's only a matter of time. While it's true now the temple is out of the Hellenist hands, and now it's held in holy hands, and everything, it's serving God, God forbid, there's no idols there, etc." He says, but we cannot just remain, right, with our heads in the sand. It's not over. And therefore Judah said, what we're going to do is we're going to fight multiple wars on many fronts. And they did. So for 6 months following the story of Chanukah, nobody rested. They rested that day, they rededicated, etc. But then Judah called a meeting and said, we can't end here. They went to all parts of the country where they had Greek soldiers, Syrian Greek soldiers, Roman influence, and they fought wars, bloody wars, for 6 months. And they were victorious. Once again, there wasn't a lot of people. There was probably more than did the 40. Once that miracle of 40,000, there were more people joined Judah Maccabee and his brothers. For 6 months, this war went on. 6 months, they were clearing their land from outside interlopers, from agitators, from enemies, and it was bloody wars, and only then could Judah and his family and others return to the lands and begin farming again, begin leading a normal life. So there were multiple thousands, tens of thousands people killed after the story of Chanukah, people that are normally over. Now, the fact that you had somebody like Matthias and his sons and their comrades and a few of their spiritual cohorts that joined them, right, was awe-inspiring. And I believe this is one of the fundamental lessons of Chanukah. You could look to yourself. You could say to yourself, you can look around and say to yourself, my goodness, I'm just one person. I am unable to foster change. Right? There is such a dearth of Jewish knowledge, right, in the world today by Jews, that you could say to yourself, what can I do about it? So the answer is you can. Right? This is kind of what we were saying yesterday. The Maccabees, if they would have thought logically, if the Maccabees would have said to themselves, hold on a second here, we just got 1,000 people, or we just got 700 people, whatever it is, whatever the number was, there's no way we're going to be successful. We would not be here today. It would be over. We would have long assimilated, like many of the Hellenist Jews did, long assimilated. But the Maccabees didn't do that. The Maccabees said, we cannot think with logic. Logic is immaterial. Not when it comes to keeping Judaism alive. And so therefore, they stepped up to the plate. So, my friends, this is the lesson of Chanukah. So, we may feel that there's so much ignorance out there, there's so much illiteracy out there, there's so much this, that, and the other. What can I do? The answer is be a Maccabee. Right? Be a Maccabee. Step up to the plate. Do your part. Right? Take care of your 20 square feet of space. Let your 20 feet of space be inspired. And who knows? The person you inspire may inspire their 20 feet of space. Now we got 40 feet. And on and on and on and on and on. So yes, be a proud, as Susan writes, be a proud Jew. And just like the Maccabees were, they would not bow down, they would not eat the pork, they would not offer bow down to an idol or anything like that. They would not offer an idol as a sacrifice and to God. They wouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it either. Right? We shouldn't do it either. You got to be a Maccabee. You got to be a Maccabee. You got to make sure your kids don't hate you, Susan. I mean, you gotta work on that. We can talk privately, but you really have to stand up, and you see, right? The bottom line is the oil lasted for 8 days. Ultimately, you cannot extinguish the Jew. That was the lesson of the burning bush. That was the lesson of the olive oil lasting 8 days. You can't extinguish it. The Romans tried, the Greeks tried, the Nazis tried, the Spanish tried, right? The British tried. We can just go through. The Byzantines tried. They've tried, but they can't, because the olive oil burns brightly, and the olive oil is never used up. The olive oil symbolizes our inner self. Ultimately, whether you realize it or not, your person has a soul, and in that soul is a burning olive oil soul that can never be extinguished. And that's why, according to Jewish law, if a person converts to something else, to a Taoist, they're still a Jew in the eyes of Judaism, because you can't extinguish the soul. Be a Maccabee. That is the message of today's class. Be a Maccabee. If you've enjoyed this class, please share it. If you can share it with somebody who'll be inspired, please share it. Be a Maccabee once again. And as we go on, we're going to be talking about the Maccabee brothers a little bit. We're going to be talking about some of the things they did that need to be discussed, and the 2 miracles we'll discuss further, etc. So God bless, and hope you have a happy Chanukah. We will resume, please God, tomorrow. Be well. Bye.